My name is Robert Hernandez. I'm a digital journalism professor at USC Annenberg, and what that means is I get to nerd out in my class. And in this slide here, you see a bunch of different technologies that I've played with, from VR to drones and wearables and nerdy stuff that I put on my face. And we'll talk about that stuff. My background before becoming a professor, and I put professor in quotes, is that I was a product of the newsroom. I was director of development for SeattleTimes.com, where I ran a team of engineers and designers. And USC made me an offer I couldn't refuse to essentially do R&D for the industry. I don't have to worry about the ROIs of anything. I get to just experiment, hijack new technology, and view it through the prism of journalism. So we're at a digital innovator conference. We know this stuff, but I like to set the table for one quick moment. The adoption rate to all these platforms skyrocket, right? If something new comes out, you download it. Did Yo make it out here? Anyone heard of the app Yo? Yo. All it does was say Yo. Almost like a million users signed up for it in one day. They were all gone the next, right? Peach, anyone download the peach.cool app, right? These are things that someone put something out, we go try it out. Sometimes we don't even ask questions. If our Lord and Savior Steve Jobs, through Tim Cook, says this is a new watch you must buy, people go buy it, right? So the adoption rate for technology is moving fast, right? We know this. It's hard to believe that Twitter just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. Let's hope they don't screw up the product. And we know that mobile just outperforms broadband desktop stuff. We see the influence of mobile in our content, in our journalism. This was taken today from Brussels, the attack, right? Not only photos, but videos as well. This is a video from what someone took from the evacuation this morning, right? This is happening in real time. All this stuff is happening in real time. This is an example I always give from the Boston bombing. It's a couple years old. There's the Boston Marathon bombing, a photo taken by David Green. And think about it for one moment. David just experienced a terrorist attack. And he's running away from everything, and it says, I got to put that on Facebook, right? He took a picture and put it on Facebook. For better or for worse, this is our reality, right? And we all know this, right? The authorities knew that. So the FBI and authorities asked everyone at the event, hey, we know you took photos. We're looking for suspects. Can you take a look at those photos and see if you find any of the suspects? David looked at his photo, and lo and behold, he found the younger brother who was involved with the bombing. I show this photo not only for that, but also for the fact that this young lady is not holding a newspaper. She's not holding a television set. She's not holding a radio. She's not holding a laptop. In fact, she's holding all those things in one, clutched to her chest, right? That's a mobile device, right? That helps kind of set the table. I also like to set the table with this stat, which is actually kind of old now. It says 91% of Americans, but I would argue this is global, have their mobile devices within arm's reach 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's the first thing you look at when you wake up. It's the last thing you look at when you go to sleep. And somehow, if you're married, your spouse is okay with that, right? It just is the way of life. You leave the house without your phone, you panic. You leave your house without your purse or wallet, you'll survive. Laptop, hey, it's a light work day, right? I was talking to someone last night about their smartwatch. They'll live without a smartwatch, but their phone is with them at all times. If it's not in your hands, it's in your purse, it's in your back pocket. If you think about it, this essentially is a wearable. This is an inefficiently designed wearable. It's in my hand at all times. It's inefficient because I get out of the reality and just lock into the screen. If I'm nimble, it's one-handed. If I'm not as nimble, it's two-handed, or you got a phablet phone, two-handed, right? It's with you all the time. So let's just make that leap into the concept of wearables. This is a slide from a colleague from New Zealand who said, well, if we look at evolution of technology, if you start with the concept of computers, mainframes filled up a room, and they got smaller and smaller and more powerful over time, well, we see the evolution to desktop, to laptop, to smartphone, a little bit of a tablet, to Google Glass. Well, probably not Google Glass. That said, 2 years ago, I asked myself a question of well, okay, what if wearables were a thing and Google Glass became a thing? What would our content and our stories be there, right? So I created a class called Glass Journalism. I brought students together. A third of them were developers, a third of them were journalists, and a third of them are what I call misfits. PR folks, marketing folks, UX, UI designers, and we came together to try to figure out what the heck would a story be on this device. We got written up about, which is great, yay. Mashable wrote about us, Coca-Cola wrote about us, but they were focusing on the technology. I'm more interested in how do you tell a story that fits in there. So we did some cool stuff. We created some apps. But one thing we tested out was this little, this is the screen. It's smaller than the traditional first monitor that came out, 640 by 360. How do you fit that, right? Google Glass, if you hold your phone out, that screen is how much real estate it takes in your field of vision. So what kind of stories can you tell there? We did a test with this thing called Spritz. If you can read English, you know more languages than I do, I know two. I want you to take a look at that line right there. Focus on that line. You're about to read real damn fast. Raise your hand if you read that. I don't know if you call it reading, downloading, but one word at a time in a small screen, information was given to you. We did some tests on that. I did a story. There's a very famous essay called The Machine Stops, which was over 2,000 words, or 200,000 words. I don't remember the length. We put it on there just for shits and giggles to see if we can make someone's eye bleed. They never blinked for a while. We tried different lengths. We did a bunch of different user tests and moved on. The semester was over. Right now, the hotness is virtual reality. We've had a couple people yesterday talk about VR. And, you know, for those, just to kind of define it, virtual reality is when you enter another world, a virtual world, through a head-mounted display. I shut off this reality and I go into another reality. That reality could be completely made up and fictionalized, or it could be recreated, or it could be, you know, video made from something real, right? So that's virtual reality. For nerds, we think of the holodeck from Star Trek, but going to another world, essentially. And what's interesting that a lot of people often forget is virtual reality has been promised for decades, overly hyped, constantly under-delivering. Yet this kid, a former journalism student who dropped out of college in one university and came to my university, developed the Oculus Rift. Working with Noni de la Peña, who's been dubbed the godmother of VR. She's a journalist. She had an active hand in creating this billion-dollar company that starts from content and technology, right? So this young man made virtual reality not a joke. And the difference between, right off the bat, between Google Glass and virtual reality is Google Glass was just one device. There were a couple people talking about other smart glasses. But here we see the variety of different headsets. Every time I give this talk, I add a new logo, a new icon, a new device. And it's not just head-mounted displays from like HTC Vive or the Microsoft HoloLens. It's not only just how you consume the device, which also ranges from Google Cardboard, or this is my favorite one right now for $35. Google and Mattel partnered up. Do you guys remember the ViewMaster with the little disc and you click through? This is the modern version of the ViewMaster. You pop your phone in there, you look at a disc that is augmented reality, which is shit interface. But once you launch it, it's really interesting. They've got some diverse experiences that you can check out. So those are the different levels of head-mounted display. There's also different levels of content creation. And I break them up into two buckets. One bucket is CG, 3D modeling, using Maya or Cinema 4D. And you import those elements into a gaming engine like Unreal or Unity. These are things that are not in our wheelhouse in a typical newsroom. Some newsrooms, some graphics departments have started to use Cinema 4D. But what it is closer to our wheelhouse is video production. And we see, John spoke yesterday with their camera that no newsroom's ever going to afford. There's also the Nokia Ozo, no newsroom's ever going to afford. It goes for $60,000. And then it goes to the low end, like the Theta, which is about $300. The new one, Theta S, goes around for $500, and it is not very good. It's getting better, and there's some cool stuff that you can do with it, but this is a really great way for someone to test out and find the best practices of what is VR and immersive storytelling. The standard kind of setup that a lot of people are using is the thing on top there. That's Heroes 360. I prefer the Freedom 360 mount. It's a $500 mount, although you can 3D print it. And you put GoPros in there, from 6 GoPros to 14 GoPros, and you stitch it together through software. The one I use is made from Color. It's called Autopano. Color a few months ago, got bought by GoPro. GoPro bought that company. GoPro is getting into the game. GoPro announced that they're working on a camera device that's going to be really, I hope, solves a lot of problems. But even with those technical problems, which will disappear this year, you can make really compelling content. There is other things up there, like the bubble cam, and Samsung announced a way better version than this, a little eyeball called the Samsung 360. They haven't said the price point yet, I don't think. So to create content, compelling content, is possible. To consume it, you don't necessarily have to do it through a VR headset. You can publish it through YouTube 360. Facebook now does 360 videos. There are startups like Little Star and Viridio that want to be the YouTube of 360, but YouTube is going to be the YouTube of 360. So there are more players on every type of the production process to make this content. And the content varies, right? VR content has been very gimmicky over time. That is Game of Thrones from South by Southwest. You can step inside a Van Gogh painting, which is really beautiful. This piece here called The Party is haunting. It's about date rape and a college party. You see two perspectives, the victim and the person who committed it. Really powerful. Or to something where you flap your wings and you have a bird's point of view. As you flap, the fan gets stronger. Right? That's really cool. None of it is really journalism per se. So that's the question I like to wrestle with. Well, what is VR journalism? And what are the stories that we can tell about that? Well, I'm not the first one on there, although I've been experimenting with VR for some time. The first, I will credit Noni de la Peña, who did Hunger in the Golden State, an incredible experience, but hard for it to scale at the time. The other one that made big impact was the Des Moines Register, a newspaper in Iowa, created something called Harvest of Change. In VR, you can create anything you can imagine. They chose to make a farm. I don't know why they did that. Actually, I know why. I talked to them, the reason why. But they did, in Unity, recreated a virtual farm for you to explore and to experience through Oculus Rift. Since then, there have been a lot more experiences. Clouds Over Sidra from Chris Milk and Verse. They ended up partnering with the New York Times and released some stuff. Thomas Wellner did Polar Sea 360. He's doing some amazing stuff. The Wall Street Journal converted the NASDAQ of 2004 into a roller coaster ride that you would experience. The Verge I think yesterday or the day before, released an interview with Michelle Obama, really nicely done with that fantastic graphics. They did some really interesting hacks and cheats, and AP and Riot have partnered up. Again, every time I give this talk, I can add more and more logos to this thing. Here comes everybody. Are you among them? Are you experimenting, right? And before they were on the scene, I was on the scene with my students, right? This has become my brand, I guess, our googly eyes, experimenting with having my boss, Willow Bay, try this stuff out, and I created a class. This is the end credit of my class, right? This is how we ended all our videos, a 360 swap of us, and we created a brand called, I think we pronounced it Javernalism, because it was cute and it made the VR fit in journalism. So that's our brand that we made. And We were featured on the YouTube 360 front page, and we generated over 150,000 page views. No, 150,000 views of our content and experiences, and it keeps growing. This was us messing around. We did lucha libre, Mexican wrestling. We did roller derby, these women on roller skates that are badass, and a cycling event called Ciclavia in Los Angeles. Right now, that was last semester. Also last semester, I was contacted by ProPublica. They told me about a story that they were working on and asked if I and my students could visualize that in VR, and that's what we were doing this semester. In fact, I was in Houston last week, came back to the airport, hugged my wife, kissed my kid, got on the plane to come here, and we're doing a piece for them in connection to the story they released about a week or two ago called Hell and High Water. It is about the Houston shipping channel and how a storm can wipe out that area and have disastrous effects to the economy, to the environment, and to the people there. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Katrina was predicted years before it happened. It was a front-page story on the Times-Picayune, but nobody cared. So the premise for us is, how do we get someone to care about a disaster that everyone agrees will happen, but they still don't care? Maybe VR, what's been dubbed an empathy machine, could be the way to do that. When I tell you there's a 28-foot storm surge that's going to wipe out houses, your brain tries to imagine it, but it doesn't click. So VR is going to be used to try to tell that stuff. Now, that was last year. Google Glass was 2 years ago. I'm going to go back 3 years ago to augmented reality. It was a thing that I was experimenting on. Augmented reality, unlike virtual reality, is I stay in my reality, my current reality, and there are digital overlays, digital assets that are overlaid in my reality. So my reality is enhanced by digital. This is something that I was experimenting with, and I found some interesting examples. Like this one makes me laugh. Someone hacked a Microsoft Kinect so they can virtually try on clothes, aka clip art. Who the hell would do this and buy clothes like that? Well, they've improved the technology. You can try glasses or haircuts or makeup. So that's neat. I'm not interested in that augmented reality. There was another augmented reality from a beef jerky company that if you print out this logo and go to the website, Sasquatch would appear, and you can control Sasquatch and make a movie. Neat. Also not the type of reality that I'm interested in. This is the reality that I'm interested in. Anyone know this movie? Shaking your head. Terminator. This is the Terminator, right? This is what I envision, not to hurt anyone. But augmented reality is through my field of vision, things are augmented. I'm getting data in real time, right? It's giving me contextual information. That guy became our governor in California after a while. So that's what I was starting to think about. Normally, in longer talks, I have people download this app. I'll tweet out the links, the PDFs to the presentation. You can download this app. But this is from a colleague of mine, BC Heavy, and his team at Republic. And what they've done is AR art. They enhance public spaces through augmented reality. And it's hard for me to describe it, but this is in Miami. When you launch the app and point at the mural, this mural extends out. It's as if this art embraces you, and you can walk around in these experiences. This is one he did, a mural that he did in Austin a couple years ago. And here's some video of it, right? That flat screen looks like it carved into the building. And there are assets done in Unity and 3D modeling that come out and interact and come to public spaces, right? She's going to throw these orbs into our space. This is AR. It's art. It's actually trying to tell you a story about the creation of an idea, going through the beauty of marketing and advertising and out into the world. That's still art. But it makes me think, what could AR journalism be? So I thought about that question, and I created a class 3 years ago about AR journalism. And with my students, what we did was we augmented a historic library in Los Angeles. We took physical objects as our visual markers, and we overlaid information. This here was telling the story of an arson fire in the 80s, a video interview that we produced or a photo gallery. Beautiful architecture and art sprinkled throughout the building. We used AR to translate the Greek and the writing. We also had access to a private collection of the library. And so we did 3D models of some incredible, beautiful books, including Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. It's a huge book that you can see virtually and then open up and look at the pages through a photo gallery, right? It isn't necessarily journalism of top-notch, capital J journalism, not exactly. But this technology has the ability to start telling stories in a different way. Remember that evolution of that stuff? Well, I want to talk about a company called Magic Leap. Magic Leap, who's heard of this company, Magic Leap? Right? This is a mystery company that became known because Google gave them $500 million. They were known for these types of videos. They're based in Florida, not in Silicon Valley, not the tech epicenter. I recommend you look at the TED Talk by the CEO. It's really weird. But they were promoting this stuff. I don't have audio, but here's this video that came out. Right? They're promising this stuff. And people who have tested out attest that, like, oh my God, it's amazing. The thing that they're not showing you in these videos and these concept videos is that everyone needs to be wearing those glasses, right? Google glasses, perhaps, I don't know. But they are working on a mobile head-mounted display so we can have mixed reality. Let me show one more video. This is a thing they released that shows in-phone footage or in-device footage of a solar system just hanging out by the receptionist's desk or a coworker's desk, and they're stepping close into the solar system to see the sun or the rotation of the Earth. I've met with them. I talked to them about the technology. It's got really interesting stuff. They've hired freaking everybody. The best of the best are working in this company, and I think they're fully aware what they're up against in terms of the stigma of Google Glass, but they got something going here that I think if we think about, we're in a mobile-first world. A mobile phone is inefficient as a design. If a non-dorky-looking head-mounted display comes along and it has some interesting content, there's something there, and that's something that we need to think about. Like I said, I work with oh, you had a question. You had a question. Yeah. 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 Yeah, if I remember, I've met with them a year before. They were military grade, kind of like these glasses with buttons and a bit. Is it smaller now? There's going to be more coming. There's going to be more coming probably in the next couple of years. There was a rumor. Yeah, so that's how Microsoft HoloLens works. There's something called Daiquiris. Has a helmet. I don't know if you saw the helmet. It helps for industrial. They're focusing on that stuff. There are a lot of folks starting to develop those things. And there's not one out there yet. And I wouldn't jump on the first one that comes up, but I would think of that environment, the space like VR is, with the diversity of different companies and products, content creation, content distribution, content consumption. It's going to eventually get there. And I want us to think about emerging stuff, right? So yesterday, Ben gave a talk about using drones in journalism. Drone footage is just amazing, but when you pair it up with 3D modeling or 360 VR, it's breathtaking. I've been playing with sensors. It's not moving. Yeah, sensors. That's an Arduino kit, trying to figure out how to do hardware hacking. You guys from the Time Inc. UK Innovation Lab talked about beacons. I want to get my hands on beacons for those ideas. Censored journalism is something where we generate and collect our own data instead of being dependent in a government institution and who may or may not have a reason to tamper with that data. There's a couple classes and professors who've been doing stuff like that. Been trying to think of how to do 3D printed journalism, and Ben talked about making a 3D printed mount for his 2 GoPro rig. I printed out some stuff, mainly, I'll tell you what I printed. I printed out the idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it's freaking awesome. But I haven't found the journalism yet. There's also contact lenses that are coming, right? This is Google's diabetes contact lens. This came out, was announced a couple weeks ago. This contact lens improves 20/20 vision by 3 times. Pro tip, do not put on the first version. I would wait till people try it out for a while. And one thing that I'm curious about is Alexa. Who's heard of Amazon Echo? Only, okay, so in the US, it's been a sleeper hit that is coming out. And everyone I talk to says they unexpectedly love the device. It's a little cylinder that they put in the middle of the room, and they talk to it. They ask for the weather. Some people ask it for the best commute before they walk out the door. You can ask for the top news stories, things like that. But what I have found consistently with families that have kids is how kids engage with this device. They sit down and talk to it. They sit down and ask it questions. What's the distance between Los Angeles and Berlin? How long will it take me to go to Mars? And then they ask it for jokes. And from what I see, they're really bad jokes, but good enough for kids to laugh at. Now, what's also telling is that these are young kids who are not feeling awkward to talk to a computer. When I had Google Glass, I had to say, okay, Glass, take a picture. Okay, Glass, record a video. I felt awkward, right? But if this generation says, Alexa, tell me the news. Alexa, take a picture. This is something to keep an eye on, right? And the creator of this, the owner of this, is, of course, Jeff Bezos, who happens to own a really great newspaper. So I see the merging of things down the line, right? There's some potential there. So I get to experiment with this stuff and think about what would a story be on Alexa. All this stuff is constantly changing and evolving, but I always go back to this old saying, right? Content is king, right? But it's not the device, it's not the technology, it's not the device, it's not Google Glass, it's not a watch, it's not Oculus Rift. What it is the content. Content is what matters most, but not traditional content that you shovelware. An article in Snapchat, the Daily Mirror, my God, that's the worst Discover experience, where they just took an article and put it in Snapchat. That's atrocious. You missed the point. It's content optimized for the user on their device, right? You're not just putting an article there. You're not just shoveling video there. It's thinking about the vocabulary of a device, the vocabulary of a platform, the slang, right? And really optimizing content for Snapchat or Instagram or whatever is on your face or on your wrist, right? The one thing I always try to end my talks with is something that I've seen at this conference, which is really great, is it's not about the technology. It's not about like, oh my God, I bought this new thingy and it's great, I'm saving journalism. That is not the point. The point really is, for success, is culture. Like Juan Señor said last night, your CEO, your leadership needs to be excited about this, or at least smart enough not to stop the person whose job is to be excited about this and to experiment. When I hear legacy companies have a position of innovation, I look at the person and I kind of read, oh wait, they're a symbol and an island and full of shit, or are they actually doing something? Doing demos, not memos, as a colleague said. Are they experimenting and embracing? Are they actively experimenting, right? There's a quote, and a lot of people attribute it to Apple, where it says, culture eats strategy every day. It doesn't matter that you say, we're a digital-first media. when you're really a newspaper company, right? A label doesn't do any of that stuff, so it really is about culture. I often get asked, how am I training my student for the next disruption? It's basically code from the industry saying, what is coming next and are we prepared? And I think where I get to stand as a professor at a great institution is I get to lead the next disruption. You get to lead the next disruption. It's time for us to be proactive opposed to reactive to all this coming technology.
I don't know about the figures. How many people out there, neither in Germany nor anywhere else, who have these kind of devices yet?
It's a small number. But the New York Times partnered up with Google Cardboard, and every New York Times subscriber got, if you subscribe to the newspaper, you got the Google Cardboard. That was over 1 million people. So a lot of people downloaded the app, tried it out. What I heard anecdotally is they tried it out, and then they gave it to their kid, and then their kid went and said, holy shit, this is amazing, right? So it's still time. It's not mainstream just yet, but if it becomes mainstream, we're too late.
Yeah, but this brings me to the question, if maybe the entrance door might be this sense of collaboration with a certain institution?
Yes.
Or as we heard from John yesterday, collaborating with an airline or hotels or something like that provide the service, that you know that you have targeted groups, and then you can have your content going at the side as a publisher. Or, yeah, okay.
There are a lot of opportunities there. I wrote for Neiman Lab a prediction where I don't have to worry about ROI. I don't have to worry about a variety of different things. But someone like ProPublica is doing really fantastic journalism that my students won't be at that level. There's an opportunity for us to partner up where early on we can have a conversation to say, hey, would your journalism students like to participate in making this? And we benefit from to tell that story in Snapchat or in VR or some sort of app or something like that. So there definitely is opportunities to partner with academic institutions, journalism institutions, and if you find a brand that is open and progressive, that's an incredible opportunity as well.
Mm-hmm. Please, yes.
Sure. We made an Apple app, iOS app called Archive LAPL. You can go to our Tumblr, which is arjournalism.tumblr.com. It'll take you to a link to download that app. It's very old, but if you download that app, I also uploaded markers on the Tumblr, so you don't physically have to be at the library. You can cheat and put your device to the pictures there and see the experiences come out. We did our own with a company called Matayo. Did anyone know it's a German company, Matayo? They had a platform called Junayo. It was bought by Apple, and then they all stepped into a black hole, and a year later I've seen a couple emerge, but they killed the product. But I'm hoping that they're incorporating it into their phones. I watched the Apple keynote yesterday, and they were talking about the camera on the new device, and the first thing they said about that camera is augmented reality. So tea leaves, fingers crossed, lighting candles that Apple's going to release that, and that'll be a big leap forward for augmented reality. Google partnered up with Lenovo, and they're releasing this summer a Project Tango phone. Project Tango is a Google project that, it's a sensor that scans the room. And as it scans the room, it gets a 3D model and a sense of place of this room. So with that type of technology, you can start placing content that is aware that there's a pillar there, and it can hide behind a pillar. That's how you get that floating solar system and things like that. So the technology is coming.
Mm-hmm. Talking future for the moment, not only that I imagine that these gadgets, it's like the old computers 20 years ago,
yes,
you know, like mobile phones like that. Now Apple makes them smaller since yesterday or whatever. So I imagine this to be like almost, part of our bodies, like Ayn Rand said, machines of loving grace, that are more fused with us as human beings. Looking into the future, what do you really see on a philosophical level? So I talk to artists, and they say it's so immersive if you make that experience as an artist. You even don't want to come back. So really, like, where do you see this going in, let's say, in the next 2 to 3 years?
When I sat down with Magic Leap, I interviewed them it is a challenge, a significant barrier to tell someone, or for someone to make a decision to say, I'm going to put this on my face and look like an idiot, but the content is so compelling that I'm willing to do it. When Google Glass first came out, every single person that tried it on said, I want one. But Google mishandled the product, the narrative, and people started to project. It became a symbol, like the Google bus in San Francisco. It became a negative symbol. So Magic Leap has to overcome that. And they're working on different designs. And a design that many of you have, myself included, are glasses. I can put contact lenses on, but I choose not to. I really like Warby Parker. I think if this is the first form factor, it doesn't cost me anything. I don't look like an idiot. I'm just a guy with glasses. And if the content is compelling, and content is compelling, but we have to play an active role in that, I see more and more people using it. The thing with VR as well is you're in your living room looking like a dork watching this stuff. You're not out in public. So that is kind of like a gateway drug, potentially, to AR and mixed reality.
Any other question of you? Maybe one last. Do you see it's a silly question or a naive question. Do you see a dark side to that?
Sure. With anything that produces content, there's good and bad, right? Misinformation can be spread on Twitter, as well as useful information. And with virtual reality, if we focus on virtual reality, it defines your experience. I've never been to, here in World War II, I can lie to you and tell you how it was, or I can tell you the truth on how it was. And there are studies that really show that your brain believes what it's experiencing. You can remember the movie Inception? It plants memories and things like that. So we, as ethical journalists, as ethical content creators, we have an active role to play there to make sure it doesn't get abused. But it's possible.
And one success story maybe where you collected data, we said this is a democratic process. We can integrate data of people that is severe and serious, and so we don't rely on governments. Do you have a story to share with us where you did that? That had a real impact for a regional community, or even
it's still early. There's two professors that I'll give you. I'll give you three examples. One is in Miami. Someone was experimenting with putting sensors in the Miami River to collect pollution data. Another colleague named John Keefe out of WNYC taught a class virtually at Western Virginia University, where they did the same thing, trying to get pollution samples. They made their own sensors. They put it in bottles. They tried it out. John also did something called I blanked out on the animals that emerge out of the shell. Nuts. Cicadas. Cicada project in New York. They knew that after 17 years, the cicadas were going to emerge in New York once the soil hit a certain temperature. So they made these sensors, and they showed a video how to make these sensors. And lo and behold, people around the city in New York nerded out and made these sensors and popped them into soil across the city. And when it hit a certain temperature, it would send information to a map that WNYC had, and you can see where the cicadas were emerging. Matt Waite, who's one of the forefronts of sensor journalism, he just was messing around and made a sensor to put in his suitcase to see how the TSA would handle his luggage. And it's a miracle he didn't get arrested because it looked like a bomb. But there's pilot projects, small projects like that, monitoring sound, monitoring pollution.
That might be a last question from my part. So the sensory part of it, so smell and 360-degree sound and everything.
Yes.
When do you think these kind of aspects
The audio's already there. The audio is called spatial audio.
So really working.
It's really
fine?
It's complicated to make, to merge the video and the audio together, but it's there and it's going to develop quickly. Sense of smell, I'm sure people are working on it. I really don't care about the new technology from 5 to 10 years out, or maybe even 3 to 5 years out. I'm a product of the newsroom, and I'm into stuff that is going to break and influence our journalism now. That is, the barrier for entry is low enough that a typical newsroom with a tight budget can in fact experiment and create and learn and prepare for when it goes mainstream.
We heard yesterday about 2,000 euros and you can already start to do something like that.
Yeah.
So you give us the lesson, be better part of the journey. Thank you very much for your journey.
Thank you.